As a confidence coach in Calgary who works with businesses and individuals, I have seen that confidence looks different for everyone. In this podcast, we explore confidence through the eyes of our diverse community, redefining it one conversation at a time. Welcome to Confidence Redefined. I'm your host, Alyssa McMasters. Today, we are sitting down with Casey, the owner and founder of Urban Officiant, one of Calgary's favorite officiant companies that has now married over 1,000 couples. For over 13 years, Casey has captivated audiences with his dynamic public speaking, whether in small, intimate settings or in front of thousands. His passion for connecting with people shines through every message he delivers. As the founder of Urban Officiant, Casey's mission is to craft wedding ceremonies that celebrate each couple's unique love story. Drawing from his own experience, he understands the importance of meaningful ceremonies that kick off the celebration in the right spirit. Casey's love for marriage, especially to his wife Krista since 2001, has shaped a life full of love and adventure, raising 4 amazing kids along the way. Today, Casey will share his expert tips on building and maintaining healthy relationships before and after marriage. He'll offer insights that give us the confidence to invest in the work needed for relationships to truly thrive. Welcome, Casey. Hi, Casey. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm so happy to see you again. And for everybody watching, listening, you were my husband and I's officiant at our wedding. And the reason why I wanted to bring you into this podcast, Confidence Redefined, is to talk about how we can find confidence in relationships, because you did a really interesting, how long was it, 6-week kind of program with us before we got married, talking about some of the tips that we can use to be more confident with each other in our relationship, and we still use them to this day.
Cool.
Like probably daily,
That's
to
really
be honest.
cool.
And I'm going to tell you some of the ones that we really stood out to us.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to get kind of your opinion and hear from your side of like what things you really think add to confidence in relationships.
Cool.
I also want to talk a little bit about today about when you're not in a relationship and how you can kind of get ready for that, because I think a lot of people are like, okay, I need to find the right person, but they don't think like, do I feel ready? Am I going to bring my best self to the table? Yep. Does this sound fun?
Sounds super fun. Thank you so much for having me. I'm extremely honored and blessed to be a part of your life, your and Steve's life, and to see you these years later just thriving in your marriage, having babies, and just rocking at life. So thank you for having me. This is an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to know first how you got into officiating weddings, why that felt like a calling for you.
Thank you for asking that question, because it is an interesting one in regards to, it was not something that I pictured or had this massive dream or vision for a super long time. But I found myself in a place, I was working at a church as a pastor, as an outreach guy, and I wanted to connect with people at a deeper level. And in the world today, it just seemed like everybody was getting married outside of the church, and so I wanted to be where people were at so I could connect with them in that way. So I had a friend that had an officiant company in BC where we moved out here from, and I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a try. So we'll see how it goes, and I started Urban Officiant, and it was just me, and I got 1 booking, 2 bookings, 3, 4. That first year was like 25, working full time. The next year I had like 70 bookings come through, and it just grew from there. So at that time I'm like, man, I got to start to add more officiants, more team members, so that we can meet the need and the opportunity. But I think what was the success and the heart and the dream behind Urban Officiant wasn't a business. It was more an opportunity to add value to people's lives. Marriage in our world today has suffered greatly in our society, and I just think that it's the cornerstone of a thriving, successful society. So what better spot in a person's life to be a part of, helping them step into this beautiful thing called marriage, beautiful, messy thing called marriage, and have an opportunity to help them grow and add value to it. And that's what we've been doing for the last 3-4 years, and just having a blast doing it.
Yeah, and I think when most people think officiant, they think of someone who like reads like, I do, great, you kiss the bride. What I love so much about Urban Officiant is it was not only did you really learn about, like, example for our wedding, you really learned about Steve and I, and then you brought all of our own personal elements into those vows and into our ceremony. So it didn't feel like, cookie cutter, you're just reading from a book. It really felt like it was about us. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. They're looking for more heart in it, right? They might love the idea of bringing faith into it, but they're like, how can I bring faith but still feel really new and like myself and personalized? I know one of my friends got married with one of your officiants, and they sang Kendrick Lamar down the aisle, and then the whole ceremony was based on Kendrick Lamar lyrics. And now they named their daughter Kendrick.
Nice.
Oh, it's so sweet.
That's fitting.
So it's just so different, and it was so fun, and we felt so special to have you there, and we felt like actually connected with the words that we were saying and not just like going with emotions to say I do.
That's very meaningful, because that ultimately is the heart of it. Is we don't want the ceremony to be, let's get this over with so we can move on to the party. But the marriage ceremony is really the anchor of the beginning of a new chapter of your love story. So to create something that is personalized and that is custom and best reflects who you are as a couple is super important to me and to Urban Officiant, and just the way that we approach it is relationship, so that we don't seem like we're some, random dude showing up on your wedding day, the biggest day of your life so far, to have a part and then you're forgotten about. So that really means a lot, hearing that from you, that it was custom and special and meaningful.
Yeah, and especially getting married in 2020 and having to cancel our 500 person wedding and have 30 at the wedding. The ceremony was the important part, right? And we really sat with it. We're like, why are we getting married? Are we getting married at a party? Sure, to be fun. But we're getting married to like really be with each other and vow to each other. So the ceremony was the important part for us. So as much as, don't get me wrong, I would have loved the 500 person party, but the ceremony itself, it really helped us like settle in to be like, no, this is why we're getting married. And it really made us rethink why we were getting married and focus on the why, not just kind of like going through the motions. Yeah. So you have, after we do some math, you have worked with thousands of couples.
Yeah, there's definitely a few that we've worked with.
Now, this is a kind of fun question. Is there anything in particular that you're like, this is going to last? Like, there's a little spark here. There's something going on here. Is there something that you kind of see that you're like, yeah, this is going to be good?
Yeah, you definitely can't help but think about that sometimes when you're doing a wedding ceremony, getting to know a couple. We do offer relationship coaching, like a pre-marriage thing that you guys went through to learn about each other. That's definitely where we can really help to pull out any issues that might be roadblocks in the future and kind of work through those. But just day of showing up, a quick 1 hour consultation, working with couples. It's obviously there's no magic thing to look for, but sometimes you see the people that they're surrounded by, and you see, family and friends that are there that are invested in this couple's lives to help them succeed in their marriage. That's definitely something that I feel stands out to me when doing a marriage. It's like they're not alone in this. And I think marriage is something that is between a husband and wife. It's between a man and a woman when they go through it, but a community around them, it sure helps. It sure makes things.
Yeah, especially when things don't go the way that we want them to go. Maybe, we talk about like the big issues that we see in lives and in relationships, and that is death, a loss of a job, it's grief, it's parenthood. When these things hit that we didn't expect, or things hit differently, it's that support system that's going to help get you through that. It's not just partners. And I think that's a really good piece to acknowledge, that it's everyone involved in a marriage and around the marriage that's really going to help it just like feel more confident in the long run.
Yep, absolutely. The people you surround yourself will help you. I would even encourage couples that are married, or even, planning on getting married, find a marriage mentor. There's some good programs out there that you can find, or maybe within your own community, find a marriage mentor. Maybe people grew up and they didn't have a healthy example of what marriage looked like, or parenting, or relationships. That definitely builds confidence. If we're talking about confidence, when you can learn from somebody and go like, you know what, I love that, approach, or I love that tool, or whatever it is, to kind of come under that and learn from them so that you can be the best that you can be in the relationship.
I love what you said there, because not everyone does have like a more healthy relationship that they want to emulate in their lives. So we can look for that externally too, and find people that we find really inspirational in their marriage and chat to them about it. Do you have any advice for people who are, maybe they're not even engaged yet, but they're kind of in that dating stage, starting to think about it, to really start thinking about marriage and what that entails, rather than just like the wedding and the exciting ring and et cetera?
Yeah. I think oftentimes in marriage, what you see two broken people coming together thinking the other person is going to fix some of those deep rooted needs or issues that people struggle with, and we all have them. We all got baggage. So I think, the primary piece of advice that I would say, if you're prepping or getting ready for marriage or want to be the best you can be when you do find the right person, is work on yourself. Deal with the baggage inside of you, deal with the brokenness inside of you, and really go deep to find out who you are and what matters to you and how you communicate and how you give love and receive love, and find out those types of things so that you can be ready to be the spouse that you want to be to your partner, right?
And you've been married for how many years?
Coming up on 23 years.
23 years and 4 beautiful babes.
4 amazing kids, an amazing wife.
That's so great. And do you feel like your marriage has stayed the same over 23 years? Or I'm going to guess it's probably changed throughout, throughout the years. We're kind of talking about kind of the before. Do you feel like you kind of did enough work before to be ready to be in a marriage? Or did you learn a lot of that when you were already married?
Not at all. I didn't really, I was the bachelor for sure, like just not really aware. And I think that's the biggest thing, aware of some of the issues that I had. And I think that's the beautiful thing of the gift of marriage, is that it puts a magnifying glass on your issues. You can't hide, you can't escape, you can't run from. Well, you can continue to do that. You can't bury them or drown them out with partying and alcohol and all those sorts of things. You're forced to face them, because now how you react and who you are deeply affects somebody else. And so I didn't do any work. So our first couple of years of marriage was tough. Definitely was tough.
Yeah. And we often, like, we do our own personal work if we have the foresight to do so. But like you said, you have a magnifying glass on your marriage once you're married, and it can be really debilitating for people, being like, I now have a team here. The other side, it's also really exciting. You're like, I have a team now. Like, this is really cool. I'm not on my own anymore. I'm not having to make these decisions alone. I have this other person that I can bounce ideas off of and create this team. So how do you think, like, maybe you have some advice on how you can go from being like, ugh, like I have this other person I have to take care of, to like, I now have a team, and kind of change that mindset? Do you have any advice around that?
I mean, I think that's got to be the foundation of it right off the get-go, right? I mean, that mindset to be like, man, we're going to do this and conquer this together. If you ask somebody like, what is the purpose of marriage? You might get different answers. Some cultures might say it's to populate the earth or whatever. I think that the purpose of marriage is oneness. And by the meaning of oneness, I don't mean that you lose who you are, but together, there's a togetherness in life, in vision, and purpose. And so when you're together in marriage, that commitment level of like, this might not be easy all the time, but I got your back. Like, I'm not going anywhere. I grew up in a family, my parents got divorced when I was young. So for me, I was like, that D word will never be mentioned in my house, ever. No matter how hard or how dark the night gets, it will never be something that comes across my mind. So I think, to approach marriage is like, now I got a teammate that's going to help me thrive in life, and I can help her, and we can do this together, is just super, super important to have that right off the get-go. The other thing that I'd say too, that for us, like in the church world, in the Christian world, there's lots of marriage resources. Mm-hmm. I find that in culture today, we don't go to those resources unless we got issues, unless we're struggling, unless it's difficult.
Yeah, it's very reactive. Hey, it's like, okay, we're now at a point where we're now very angry with each other. a lot of things going on. It's not just like, hey, yeah, maybe we should like, when something happens,
Right.
we'll have the tools to do so. That's really interesting. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think it's maybe just not knowing that those tools are out there. Obviously, there's books, podcasts, like it's everywhere to be able to get the tools and resources that you need. But potentially, it's almost like an unawareness of, well, we don't have any issues right now, so why? But like you and Steve, you guys did it ahead of time because you wanted to invest, much like Krista and I did in the beginning stages of our marriage. We'd go to these marriage conferences. We'd be the youngest people there, and I remember these older couples would come up to us and be like, "There's no way you guys are like struggling right now. Why are you here?" And, I just remember our response was like, well, we want to build the tools now and get the baggage out now, not that there's not going to be more things we're going to face in life, but so that when things get tough, we have a foundation that is built on more than just emotion, because I think sometimes love can push us in a direction as an emotion, but oftentimes love is more than an emotion, it's a choice. And you have to choose to love that person and love yourself in spite of failures, fall, that sort of stuff. So, I think it's just super important to prepare the best you can. And I heard another relationship coach, mentor say it this way, that marriage, when you get married, yes, you're married, but you're also beginning a journey of learning how to be married. And that's fluent, right? Mm-hmm. That's not just one size fits all throughout your whole life, but you have kids, job changes, death, there's so many different things that happen in life that you're journeying together. It's a journey together. So to face it together with that commitment and that confidence that we're not leaving this, that's the vow we make to each other.
When we kind of started our learning is we think about we need a tool belt, right? We want to have 40 tools around us that we can kind of pull out when things get hard. Because it's not if, it's when, right? When things are going to get hard. One of the biggest ones for us, and I want to get to some tools now. Does that work for you? Yeah. Okay. One of the biggest ones for us is the internal versus external processor. Do you remember teaching that? Okay. I am an external processor, obviously. Look at me. All I do is talk. My husband is an internal processor. Even though he's also very extroverted, when we have a problem, I have to talk it out, to the point I'm beating a dead horse. I'm just circling and circling and circling. And he needs to internally process things and sit with it, take him some time for himself, maybe journal a little bit, and then come to me. Now, how I was perceiving that is he doesn't care. I'm talking and he's sitting there silent, he just doesn't care enough, or he doesn't want to be part of the conversation. And when we realized that we process things differently, we were like, oh, okay. And on the other side, he thought, example, people going out to a restaurant for dinner. Yep. And he'd say, hey, we're going to go to Original Joe's. I don't know. And I say, well, or we could go here. Right? And he's like, well, she doesn't like any of my ideas. In my mind, I'm like, well, let's just talk it out so we can see what's the best option is. When we realized that we just process differently, that changed everything. So now he just walks away. He takes some time to himself, comes back to me, and then he'll listen and he'll try to externally process a little bit with me. And finding that we just do things differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we're not taught that, right? We're not taught that that's a normal thing, that not everybody processes information the same. That was one of the big ones for me. Do you use that in your marriage?
100%. And I think what it is, we all know that we're different, right? And, it's the old adage saying that, opposites attract. And that probably is one of the biggest conflicts in marriage, is the differences individually that we have. And there's three things that you can do with differences. You can tolerate them, but when you tolerate, what's going to happen? Resentment, agitation. You get these feelings that you don't really speak about, that he doesn't care about me, or he does not seeing me or valuing my opinion. I had the same thing with my wife, where she would process things outside. Exact same example, right? I'd be like, hey, we're going for dinner. We're going here. Well, if we go there, I'm going to maybe have this. What if we go to this place? And there could be a lineup. And there's this big conversation. I'm like, you asked me where I wanted to go. I said X place. Why are we talking about this still, right? And I didn't understand that to feel a team, she needed to talk it through a little bit more and look at the options. And ultimately, we probably would have gone where I said, anyway, I didn't understand that. So I felt threatened. Like I felt like, well, she's trying to change me. She's trying to make me into who she wants me to be instead of just receiving and accepting me for who I am. So I totally get that. So we can tolerate differences. We can terminate them and try and get rid of them, but oftentimes they're hardwired into us, these differences. Not that we can't change or work on them, we can, or we can affirm them and learn to appreciate the differences that we have. And I think when you have language to put around it, so some of the differences, spender, saver, right? Maybe that's a difference, that one in the relationship is a spender, one is a saver, and they just don't understand how that person operates the way they do. A planner or spontaneous would be another one, right? Like we would go camping and I'm like, what's wrong with just throwing a pair of underwear and a pair of shorts and a pair of jeans and a t-shirt in the van and let's go. And she's got a big 20-liter bag just in case of weather changes and all these things. I'm like, I don't understand that. But I've learned to appreciate that about my wife because, if it gets cold, now all of a sudden we got hoodies. Or if I get a headache, I got Tylenol, I got Advil, I got whatever, right? But I think, in our marriage, I found that because I didn't have language or tools to appreciate these things and learn about the way that she operated, she felt also that I didn't value who she was. So she's like, oh, he doesn't want me to be like this. So she started pulling back. And I think that was definitely not life-giving for her. So when we learned these tools and found some language to put around them, we started to learn to appreciate these differences and grow. So internal processor, external processor. I'm trying to think of some other ones off the cuff here. Spender, saver, spontaneous, planner.
Even like someone who goes out, someone who likes a homebody,
right?
Right. Yeah.
Somebody who needs that alone time to refresh.
Introvert, extrovert.
Introvert, extrovert. That's another one that, and it's okay. It's not better. It's just different.
Yeah.
And so we just need to learn to appreciate it about each other.
Now, I'm interested also kind of your point of view, and I'd like to kind of chat this out a little. Someone who's not in a relationship right now, how they can also use this to determine who they are, and then how they can have the confidence to talk about this with a potential partner in the future.
Yep.
What do you think?
Yep. I think that, there's all sorts of resources out there. So I'm not the expert that wrote the book on these things. So Google it. Like what are differences that couples face in relationship? It'll lay out 10, 15 of them that you could learn about yourself. There's books. There's a book called His Needs, Her Needs, where you can learn about emotional needs. And those emotional needs are kind of something that's hardwired into you, like domestic partnership, conversation could be, and those are things we all need, but these things would give you oxygen. They're things that like, oh my goodness, I come alive when I have sexual intimacy, or it's not just a physical need, it's this deep emotional need where I feel appreciated and valued. Time alone would be one, right? So if your spouse is always wanting to be with you and you're like, I just need some time for myself, they don't understand that. If you learn those things about yourself ahead of time, 5 love languages is another one that's pretty well known out there, right? So you learn your love languages. Have you heard of those ones?
Of course. And mine, I am words of affirmation. You tell me that you love me, I'm good. We're good. And it was actually interesting you said something. My husband's, one of them is quality time. Cool. But it looks a little bit different. He feels love when he's given his own quality time. Like you said. So yes, he loves having quality time together, but he also, when I'm like, hey, go play hockey tonight, like, I got the kid, don't worry about it, he feels very loved by getting that time. But having those conversations are one that like we don't really talk about. I know my parents didn't really talk about it. We just didn't have the language. We didn't have the resources. And I feel like we're kind of now talking about it. But like you said, I think a lot of people are talking about these things once things go south. When instead, if we can start thinking about it, even when we're single, about what's my love language, I actually want to ask the person that I'm dating what theirs is so I can show up in a way that they feel loved. Yeah. Something else that we also talked about, which is not as common, and I learned it through you, is the apology languages. Oh, yeah. That was also an interesting one. I was like, well, what? And how people actually feel supported and in a team when they get apologies differently. I'm words of affirmation. But when it comes to apologies, I need you to take action. I need you to actually show that you're going to change. Some people need a verbal "I'm sorry," and that's enough for them. So figuring out those kind of differences and understanding that they're actually quite beautiful to work together with, because at the end of the day, we both can't just talk to each other all the time. Like, we can't just like be me and blah 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 all the time. We need to have balance in everything.
Yeah, and so if someone's single, to learn those things ahead of time and to practice them. That's part of maybe even dealing with some baggage that you might have, is reconciling your past, right? And forgiving. And I think forgiveness sometimes it's misunderstood, because sometimes the apology or forgiveness to someone who's been offended or hurt feels like you're almost justifying or giving permission that it was okay. It's not at all saying it was okay. And sometimes there's still a need for healthy boundaries, but forgiveness releases you. It's not really necessarily about the other person. So the apology sometimes that we have when we offer an apology reflects how we would want it versus how we know that or need to know how that person would receive it. Much like love, right? Mm-hmm. We give love sometimes the way that we receive love, but when we do that, we could totally miss filling up that love tank because that's not the way that they receive it. Yeah. So if you're single, learn those things about yourself so that you can go into that relationship knowing how you can receive love and your emotional needs and the health of your insides are in a good spot.
Yeah. And I think as we're touching on this conversation, we also have to touch on, what if one partner is all for it and the other partner does not care? Do you have any advice on what that might look like? From my perspective, it's really going to be case by case and the relationship and where you're at in a relationship. But I know a lot of people struggle where it's like, yes, like, and they talk to me as my clients, they're like, yes, I want to learn all this, but my partner won't even talk about it. Is there anywhere to start?
I think grace is having grace, undeserved kindness towards your partner is a huge starting point. And oftentimes you will win them over versus nagging, but having grace. Also, clarity in conversation would help with that. So, for example, it would be explaining how important this is, and maybe even not an ultimatum, but a proposal that says, I need you to know how important you understanding my emotional needs are. So please, all I'm asking for is 5 weeks, or all I'm asking for is 1 hour that we talk about these things or whatever, because it definitely is something that will affect both of us. And then leaving it for a little bit, let that stew in that other person. But it is tough. Like, I think there's this misconception in marriage that it's 50-50. I don't know, Alyssa, have you experienced that it's 50-50?
It's never been 50-50.
Right?
Sometimes it's 100-0. Actually, I hear two sides of things.
Yeah.
It's 100-100. You both got to give 100. But what about when, like, I come home after taking care of the kid all day and I'm exhausted, and then my husband wants to go out for dinner and I'm like, I can't. We actually, and you might have heard of this, the 100% rule.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this rule?
No.
Where you verbally say where you're at in the percentage.
Nice.
So eventually, let's say you want to go out for dinner or you want to do something. You have to hit 100% in order to get there. And you look at your partner and say, I'm at 20%. Can you give me 80?
I love it.
Yeah. Can you make up that 30%? If they say, listen, I'm also at 20%, that's when you put on a movie. That's when you order takeout and you go to bed early, right?
Yeah.
But verbally saying, like, I'm at 20, like, my dude, I got no capacity, is really helpful, so that when I'm also a little irritable, he's like, you're at 20. It's okay.
Yeah. It's okay. There's that grace,
tomorrow,
right?
You'll be at 80, but like right now, I'll just take it. I'll
Yeah.
take it, because we can kind of verbalize that you're not in the best place that day. And exactly like that, it's not 50-50. But I want to hear more about your kind of perspective on that, the 50-50.
No, that's huge. Like, I think I love that, breaking it out into 100 or even 110% sometimes, that you have to carry it because the other person is totally depleted. And you're picking up the weight of that. It's a season. It's not going to last forever. But when you invest that into that relationship, you will reap rewards. Because talk about confidence in a relationship. How much would you feel valued, Alyssa, or do you feel valued in that relationship and feel confident when Steve does that for you?
100%. And not just like, I don't feel, not just in our marriage, but I'm like, I feel confident that things are going to get done.
Yeah.
Like I feel like my family's going to be taken care of. It's so much bigger than just like our marriage is good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that open communication is huge. I've never heard of that 100%. That's really cool that you can talk about that and be like, hey, like, I just don't have it in me and I'm at 20. Can you be, 80 to get us there? Or even if we can get to 80 together.
Yeah, like we can do it,
Right.
but yeah.
Yeah. So that's great language and a great tool to be able to help a couple flourish in that way.
Yeah. Do you have any other tools that really stand out to you that you're like, this has been a game changer for either yourself or people that you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think active listening is one, and communication is going to be huge, right? So in our society today, statistics, from the circle of relationships, would say that the two biggest things that cause conflict in marriage is drift and is communication. So those two things, right? And obviously, if you don't have communication, then drift is going to happen. Drift is something natural in any relationship, right? Friendships, mother-daughter, family relationships, husband-wife, any relationship, there's going to be natural drift. So I always approach marriage when I talk to couples about this, especially when they're struggling, that primarily one of the reasons why you're experiencing this place of drift is you stop doing the things that you used to do. And one of those things is dating your spouse. So that's a tool that I always try and encourage in my own life is never, ever, ever stop dating your partner. Like, don't stop. Like, dating, do the things that made you fall in love in the first place and find new things and new exciting things that you can do together.
Yeah. Now, what I often hear, and I 100% agree with everything you're saying, what I often hear is, I don't have any energy and like we don't have any money. Like, I can't go on like fancy dates all the time. What do you say about that?
True. Make it a priority. Budget it in. I got 4 kids. We're at a stage with our kids now. My oldest is 14, so she can babysit. We can go out for a walk, go for a coffee or whatever. So it's definitely a bit easier than when the kids were 2, right? Like yours. But I think that you got to make it a priority. The primary relationship in the home is the marriage relationship. And your kids will thrive when they know that foundation is solid. If they don't see mom and dad together, then there will be an uncertainty that will start to perpetuate in their hearts and in their lives. They need to see that. So make it a priority, because life will be better when you have a happy, thriving relationship with your spouse.
Yeah. I also think that people think that dates have to be like going to like a fancy steakhouse. Whereas I remember one time, one of my favorite dates, this was COVID because you couldn't do anything. And Steve put like 5 boxes out that like were like, I couldn't see into them, and I had to guess what was in each of them. I mean, he put his jock strap in one of them, like, but we would like have to feel, and we were like giggling, and it was just like such a fun date. And it was literally Amazon boxes and like random things in our house, right? It was a completely free date, and it was one of my favorites. And we felt so connected. I think people forget that dates can just be like something like that, where you just feel connected in some way. They don't have to be this like $300 dinner out.
Yeah, totally. So one of the things that I would encourage, couples to do, you're right. Like, it could be at home, could be a walk in the neighborhood. It could be over, but one of the things that I would encourage you is take a piece of paper, each of you write down 1 or 2 of your favorite dates. And I'll bet you will find that it's not an expensive thing. It's a date that you connected. It's a time that you had where you felt heard. It's a time that you had fun and you had laughter and you were out just, having a bottle of wine together, whatever, right? It doesn't have to be expensive, but make it a priority weekly, every other week, once a month at least, because life can get so dang busy. And definitely it is something that you have to fight for.
So we kind of talk about what we can do in a marriage, in a relationship, even how we can take some of those tools when we're single and start building them. But what do you think the role of self-care plays in relationships and in your confidence in your relationship?
It's huge. Like, I didn't realize this probably until the last couple of years, personally. Just self-care, obviously COVID. We lost some family members, and I felt like everything that, not everything, but I felt like my ground was shaken and my core was shaken, and some pretty nasty things started coming out of me. And I don't mean in the way I treated my wife or anybody else, but just like depression and, struggling to find out man, like I didn't realize that some of these deep insecurities and feelings were in there. So I started to go see a therapist. And that was super helpful for me just to learn to walk through, because oftentimes when we view things, it's not reality. Our mind plays tricks on us, right? And there's these narratives that are hardwired inside of us because of circumstances or trauma or life that happens that we believe about ourselves. But when we look at self-care and we're able to journey with a therapist or a friend or, individual counseling, we can find peace and wholeness and healing from things that we didn't even know was there. And when that happens, just ask my wife, I am a better husband. Like when I was going through that season of life, I wasn't there like I should have been. And I'm still working and journeying through that. But the self-care piece and the awareness of that was huge in us finding confidence and me finding confidence on who I was.
Yeah. Something that excites me so much about what you just said is a lot of people will think that self-care is self-soothing. So like baths and it's like taking out, but your self-care is like taking care of your mental health, right? Going to therapy, like really doing the work. And I agree. I think that's what self-care actually is. I think our society with capitalism has told us that we have to spend money to do self-care. We have to go for massage. When in reality, we can really just sit with ourselves and determine like what we need in that moment, because we are better partners. We're also better friends. We're also better parents. We're also better daughters. We're better everything. And it really translates to our entire community, back to the community part, right? Really translates to everyone around us.
Yep. And some of those other things too, like a nice warm bath and alone time for me, playing hockey, much like Steve, like I feel oxygen, and that's those emotional needs. So when you find out what it is that makes you feel come alive, and you need to communicate that with your partner so that it's not, you can create time for that, and that your partner can bless you and give you space for that self-care. Some people it's continuing on with these friendships outside of, for us, we spend a lot of time with other families versus me going out and doing things on my own with buddies or whatever. So it all depends on what it is that brings you life or gives you oxygen. But it's super important because when you return from that, you'll be better, right? Better together.
Yeah. Better together. And you first have to become better apart, because I think it's unfair to also ask your partner to take on all of your stuff and fix it for you.
That's right.
And I think that's what a lot of people are doing right now that I'm seeing. Even I'm guilty of it, of being like, okay, this is going on, fix it for me, right? But the reality is you have to fix it yourself before you can fix it in your relationships.
Yeah, for sure. That's super important. The other person is not 100% responsible to meet all of the needs that you have. They're the primary, right? And the communication is important, but you have to make sure that you care for yourself and know yourself.
And I think the disconnect might be often is that we rely on our partners to give us happiness, and they're not in charge of our happiness. They can be in charge of our team. They can be in charge of a lot of other things, but they're not in charge of our happiness, which is sometimes a really hard thing to kind of work through.
Yeah. Especially when you have those differences like we talked about before, right? So if I'm relying on the other person to completely meet those needs, it's a lot of pressure, right? But when I communicate them, and Chris there says, hey, like, I know you need that hockey 1 hour a week or that golf game, once a month or whatever, go do it. Just make sure when you come back, you're here. Like you're in. Oh yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, a topic that I love talking about in confidence is boundaries. I think boundaries are really, really important to set in all areas. And I think when you can learn how to set your own boundaries, it can really increase your confidence. What do you think the best way to set boundaries in a relationship is? And is there kind of a method that you use to set boundaries?
That's a great question. I think that, again, it comes back to communication and expressing clearly what it is that you need, and then collectively coming up with something that works for both of you. But how about you? Like, how are you creating boundaries in your relationship right now?
Yeah, I think 100% communication, right? And then setting not just like boundaries of like, this is what is acceptable to me and this is not acceptable to me, but also the repercussions, right? I think we're so used to being like, I don't like this, and then it just happens and it happens and it happens again, and setting repercussions. However, I know it's easier said than done, especially when your partner isn't as on board with changing as you are.
Yeah.
It can be really challenging, but really focusing on what your boundaries are, and then also the repercussions if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and laying that right out. And it depends on what it is, right? Some things are very serious that are immovable. Other things might be flexible where, as long as you have those. My wife, she's a planner, and she loves, planning and boundaries and things like that, which is great. But I can't remember how she puts it, but she always puts it to me like, especially with kids, we have these boundaries, but we allow freedom to be spontaneous within it. So this is the expectation, and it's laid down and it's out there, but at times we're going to move around them. So, those boundaries have walls have doors versus walls. They have opportunities for us to work together if something's not working versus just like, nope, this is the way it is. I'm not changing.
Totally. Yeah. And making things moldable for sure. And like you said, like some things are like hard no or hard yes. And then there's a lot of like in between, and really choosing kind of the hill that you want to die on to. Really choosing like, okay, is this the end of the world?
Yeah.
Is this going to make or break us? I don't know. I think I can let it go. But some things are. Yeah. Some things are like, no, this is very, very, very important to me.
Yeah. And if you don't see eye to eye on it, you have to talk about it. And sometimes it requires getting help.
Yeah.
Right? Like to leave it unsettled is not going to help anybody.
Yeah. And that help could be, a therapy. That help could be a couples counselor, could be a relationship coach, could be a confidence coach, could be go to your officiant and be like, hey, and you're like, I actually charge $100 an hour.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, find that help, or even like you said, your community, right?
Yeah.
Like going and reaching out to people who you love and respect and asking kind of what you can do, because we can't do it alone.
That's
and this is often our first, maybe second time that we've gone through this before. And it can be really challenging. Now, we talked a lot about the strategies of like internally when things like are good and we're kind of being proactive. But what kind of advice do you have to build your confidence when those big things happen? When you face grief, when you face a job loss, when you face these big things? Is there anything that you found really helps your relationship when these things actually do happen?
Wow, that's a big one, right? That's a big question. I think, as I expressed earlier too, like we had a death of a loved one. My wife's father passed away. Shortly later, her grandfather passed away. Then her grandmother. It was just a lot of loss, and so to build confidence in there was tough. It was difficult, and it was some rocky times for us because grief hits people in different ways and trauma hits people in different ways, and how we respond to it is very individual. It's different for all of us, and it comes in waves, and it comes in different times and seasons. Some of us implode, right? Some of us externalize it. To build confidence in that process, or when difficulties happen like that, I think that it's super important to communicate that, listen, like we're in a tough time right now, but you need to know I love you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going through some stuff because I'm not an external processor. And I wish I would have done this earlier on. Said, like I'm going through some stuff. I'm working on myself. Have some grace, have patience with me. I will talk to you when I feel ready to, just have that open conversation and dialogue, and give each other space and give each other time to be able to come back to it.
Yeah.
Right? Like again,
and I think like this is the time that you like the tool belt.
Yes.
This is when you unplug it. This is when you take it off your belt, you lie it down, and you just start picking. You just start picking which ones are going to work, and choosing kind of which tools that you've built together, and which ones are going to work, and some aren't going to work in those situations as well.
Yeah, and going through difficulties, like I've had friends that have lost a child, and going through that difficulty, that's oftentimes something that that creates drift huge, because there's guilt and shame, and there's all this sort of stuff that come into play when something traumatic like that happens in somebody's life. So I think for me, prayer, faith, reaching outside of myself has been huge to know that it's going to be okay. Like this too will pass. It's going to be okay. And God's got my back, and so does my spouse. And to communicate that to each other is just amazing. It's a huge tool.
Yeah. So now what we see in the kind of the current climate is this kind of throwaway relationships where like you're just like swipe on your Tinder and all your apps and stuff. How do you think that we can have the confidence to really start being like, okay, this might be the relationship that I want to be in. It might be long term. And again, like also having the confidence to like be like, if you're in the relationship, be like stepping away, be like, this isn't the right one. But finding that balance that you're willing to put some work in to see if it's the right thing before you decide to step away from it.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a culture that is a dating culture. Even when couples get married, it's like they're still trying it out and seeing if it is going to work. And I think oftentimes when couples face difficulties or in those first couple of years, statistically in Canada, it's year 4 and you're like 25. That you guys are year 4.
No, we're coming on to year 5 and we giggle because actually year 4 was like kind of when our son was like 1 and now it was like, yeah, we definitely had some like a little bit of ups and downs in year 4. Yeah.
So it's interesting, because I think if you go back to that conversation we had about differences, and now you get into these differences where you're externally processing, internally spend or saver, magnifying issues versus minimizing, and you don't understand or have the language, then all of a sudden inside your brain you're going, did I marry the wrong person? Maybe I made a mistake. And that is the dating mentality. When someone starts showing some signs or red flags or, things in their life that don't align with who you are, yes, there's some concrete things that you need to stand for and have in your decision on who you want to marry. Get those things worked out and make a list. I encourage someone who's single, make a list. Here's the 20 things I want my spouse to be. And maybe you'll hit 99%. I don't know. But when those differences come up and you face difficulties, it is not a sign that you married the wrong person. That is the voice of the culture to tell you, your happiness is the most important thing. And right now you're not happy because you're not feeling understood or valued. So maybe it's time to pull the pin. I would venture to say that conflict and conflict based on differences is the price that happy couples are willing to pay for a thriving, healthy relationship. You don't get better with ease.
Yeah.
It takes work.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I do think that there are some, obviously, like when it comes with any kind of abuse or it comes with infidelity or it comes with really big things, some of those things, those aren't changeable, right? Yeah. Those things like we don't need to be putting up with. And I think we're kind of talking more about like those challenges like grief and those things that we're going through. So I think it's really important to like acknowledge people who are, are going through divorce because of these things, or just really didn't work, right? And they gave it their all.
Yep.
It totally happens. Obviously. And I think it's, and I think it's important to also like validate that sometimes that is the thing. Yeah. But I really like the idea of like, just like the happy couples are willing to put in that work.
Yeah. And just go through it together. Right. And I think that's the other thing too, for me being a marriage officiant and seeing ceremonies and pieces. Oftentimes couples want to write their own vows and stuff. And obviously we do that. Like we allow, or want people to write their own vows, but they're not really vows. They're more so, here's what I love about you. Do you remember that time we did this? I felt this. And they're deep, intimate feelings of affection towards each other. But the vows in a marriage ceremony, we've always traditionally in humanity been ceremonial people. I mean, you got bar mitzvahs, you got coming of age, you've got these different celebrations and moments that are markers in our lives. And so marriage is not just signing a contract. You're not signing your life away. You're not just, doing something to, pay your money. That's why justice of the peace, where you just show up and you sign a piece of paper and now we're married. Hey, or common law, what's the difference? I think there's something intrinsic that happens inside of us when we make a covenant with each other. That's why the ring is round and unbroken, because in that unbroken promise, come hell or high water, I got you. Like we're in this together and we're going to grow together. Yes, you're right. When there's abuse and infidelity, and not that some of those things can't be healed and rescued, they can. And sometimes they have amazing stories on the other end of it. But for sure, there has to be this mindset going into it that is almost against culture, that says if you're not happy, find someone else. Mm-hmm. Like if you're not happy Ask yourself why, and put the work in to find that in each other, because you'll be better for it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think when it comes to confidence, I always ask my clients to really, when they're in their relationship, before they go into the marriage, like, decide if it's the right thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Really sit with yourself and be like, is this the right thing? However, we also know that sometimes we make decisions and things happen that we could never, ever see in the future. And then we can make the decision and have the confidence to either say, I'm willing to put this work in, or like we said, some really big things happen and you just decide that you're going to have to call it quits.
Yeah.
I think there's nothing wrong with that either once you've done a lot of the work. I think like no one wants to get divorced. No one gets married being like, oh, like we're going to get divorced in 5 years. Yay. Yeah. It happens because there's this drift and there's this lack of communication, and then there's also some really big problems. And I think that there's a space for that too, and for confidence of like knowing yourself and knowing when you're not happy.
Yep.
But there's also a big space for that quick, what's that next thing? I'm bored.
Right. Yeah.
I see something shiny.
Right.
We all see something shiny every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But making those choices is a really important piece of knowing yourself and building the confidence to know if it's time to leave, but more importantly, how we can really, really dig as deep as we can to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That first initial, like I know, and I was thinking interesting when you asked me about, confidence in relationships. I don't necessarily think that confidence, whether it's self-confidence or confidence, is a lack of doubt. You know what I mean? It's a faith that even in my doubt, I'm choosing to work through this.
Yeah. A line that I like to say is, just like you can't have courage without fear, you can't have confidence without insecurity.
Love it.
You have to first feel insecurity in order to feel confident. Because no, it's not a lack of doubt. It's actually the contrary. It's actually working through it and becoming the best version of yourself despite of those insecurities, despite of that doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I think people can lose their confidence if divorce does happen. And I would just say to people too, that has happened. Have grace on yourself. Like, forgive yourself, forgive the other person, because again, like I heard, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Yeah. Right. The only person who kills you is you.
Give us 6 months to be pissed.
Right. Yeah. You
give us a year to be really angry.
And then it's a process, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
And not judge
instant.
yourself and not blame yourself, because not everything is realistically, not as much as we both are in really beautiful marriages, not everything can be dealt with communication, even though we want it to be.
Absolutely.
We want it to be, and 90%.
Yeah.
There's that 10% that just can't be, and give yourself grace.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's good.
So, Casey, I have a couple more questions finalized.
Yes.
What is the best piece of advice you've ever received when it comes to your confidence?
Oh, best piece of advice that I've ever received when it comes to confidence. Honestly, I just, because of who I am, I'm going to share this, but the best piece of confidence that I've ever received is, in order to truly find yourself, you need to lose yourself. And I think for me, it's faith, right? In God and who he's made me to be. And sometimes losing myself means stop living up to other people's expectations and going to the source of life to find out who I am. And that has built confidence in me so that I can not be fearful or insecure in who I am, but be confident in who I am because I know the one that made me, the one that created me. So knowing God and knowing that losing, the perspective of who I think I need to be versus who he says I am has given me more confidence than anything else. Beautiful. Yeah.
What's the worst piece of advice you've received?
I would say, just trust yourself.
Okay, say more.
That might sound really weird, but I know myself better than anyone else. And if I just trusted my heart sometimes, or just trusted my emotions, sometimes I would do some things that I probably wouldn't be proud of. So I think, just trust yourself. Yes, there is an element of that for sure. But I think that it can be deceiving sometimes when you're just trusting your heart and your emotion, because our emotions and our heart can lie to us sometimes.
That's a really interesting take. I love that.
Yeah, maybe a bit different than what you heard.
Yeah, that's great. Last question. What is the most important thing?
The most important thing for me, it is for sure, and again, like just because of who I am, we got a variance of audiences, but is my relationship with God. That is the most important thing that, 25 years ago radically changed my life from the trajectory that I was on. And that is the most important thing in our marriage and in my confidence and my parenting, everything. It just makes me who I am.
Casey, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
This is a really great conversation, and I'm excited to see our marriage at year 10.
Yes, come on. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Casey.
All right.
Disclaimer. This podcast is designed for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Always consult with relevant experts or professionals for personalized guidance.